Live performances online at WSMR.org and follow us on social media. Search for Classical WSMR.
Bok Tower Gardens in Lake Wales hosts Dreamweaver, Tales from the Trees, an all-new immersive art exhibition where the lines between nature and the mystical blur. Now through January 31st. Details at boktowergardens.org.
One of the things the government does is collect a lot of data, numbers upon numbers, to guide decisions and policy and measure what works. But in the first year of the Trump administration, massive troves of data on topics from climate science to medical care to nutrition were axed or altered in 2025. That's according to researchers who keep tabs on the issue. Losing this information could make it hard for people here in Tampa Bay who are trying to, say, fight hunger or figure out how to respond to climate change. I'm Matthew Petty, and ahead this hour on Florida Matters, live and local, we'll crunch some numbers and ask how the loss of federal data could affect you. Join the conversation by calling 813-755-6562 or emailing FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. Also this hour, hear from Republican gubernatorial candidate Paul Renner, and we'll talk about a trailblazing teacher who's the subject of a new documentary. All this and your calls on Florida Matters, live and local, after these headlines.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump's insistence the United States acquire Greenland is overshadowing the annual World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland this week. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports Trump is threatening new tariffs on any nation that stands opposed.
Trump recently threatened to tariff 8 European nations, all of them NATO members, if a deal is not reached for the U.S. to purchase Greenland, part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Trump also texted the Prime Minister of Norway that the fact he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize is weighing on his decision-making. Overnight, Trump posted that French President Emmanuel Macron texted him, quote, "I do not understand what you are doing on Greenland." Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke already at Davos today, defending Trump's tariffs. Tomorrow, Trump will speak, and Thursday will be an event for the Board of Peace that the president created to oversee the reconstruction of Gaza, where Trump has attempted to end the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News.
President Trump is expected to have more to say this week about his plan to reduce home prices in the U.S. It may include a ban on corporate landlords owning single-family homes. NPR's Jennifer Ludden tells us such a ban is popular with many, but it can be difficult to enact.
One cap on investor landlords did just take effect in Fishers, Indiana. Mayor Scott Fadness says the idea is to protect local home ownership.
It's been a source of generational wealth in our country, particularly in the middle class, and I hate to see that go away.
But in state after state, such proposals have failed. Economist Lori Goodman at the Urban Institute says the main driver of high prices is a housing shortage, and some investors are actually helping that by building homes to rent out.
The best way to make housing affordable is to increase supply.
Trump has said Congress would need to ban corporate home buying, and it's not clear that would pass either. Jennifer Ludden, NPR News, Washington.
More than 100 vehicles are involved in a string of highway collisions during a snowstorm in Michigan this week. Grand Valley towing manager Jeff Westfeld says yesterday's pileup on Interstate 196, just southwest of Grand Rapids, is one of the worst that his company's worked.
Full-blown accidents to winch outs, jackknife semis.
State police report a lot of injuries, but no lives lost. Netflix says it is revising its $82.7 billion offer to acquire key parts of Warner Brothers Discovery. It says it's making it an all-cash transaction instead of cash and stock. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow is down more than 500 points. S&P's off 78. Nasdaq's lost 313 points. It's NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Charles Schwab, offering investors choices like full-service wealth management, advice, investing, and trading on Thinkorswim. Learn more at schwab.com. And from the Doris Duke Foundation.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. A record 92.2% of the state's high school seniors graduated last year. That is an increase of 2.5 percentage points from the previous school year. During his State of the State address, Governor Ron DeSantis credited the increase to a change in testing.
To better measure performance, we replace high-stakes testing with more reliable and consistent progress monitoring.
Gary Brady is Hillsborough County Schools' chief academic officer. He says while his district reached a record rate of nearly 91%, there is still more they can do.
Obviously, we'd love 100% grad rate.
Locally, Pasco County had the highest graduation rate at 95.5%, followed by Sarasota and Pinellas. You can see a county-by-county breakdown at WUSF.org. The PBS Kids TV show Xavier Riddle does not have a new season lined up. Brad Meltzer is the show's creator. He told the Florida Roundup it's because of uncertainty over the lack of government funding for public media.
You're not going to find the new season of just about any show that's on there because everyone is trying to figure out how we're going to keep the lights on.
He said the children most affected by losing PBS programs are in households that can't afford streaming services or cable.
That's who you're hurting. And these kids who need it most, these kids who are seeing that there's a bigger world out there. For me, that's who I was.
Meltzer says he was the first in his immediate family to attend a 4-year college and that he learned about higher education from watching TV. St. Petersburg wants to buy flood risk property to help residents recover from hurricanes. According to the St. Pete Catalyst, it's part of a second phase in the city's $160 million disaster recovery plan. It's a federally funded program called Sunrise St. Pete. The plan is to buy 14 high-risk residential or commercial properties, then offer home buyer assistance and voluntary buyout programs. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
I'm Daylina Miller, multimedia journalist at WUSF. See photo galleries, videos, and so much more on WUSF.org, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Catch me in your community. And say cheese!
Oslo Rep presents the Pulitzer Prize-winning play Primary Trust. Ebony Booth's new play is about 38-year-old Kenneth scraping by in small-town America. Now through February 11th, tickets at oslorep.org.
This is Florida Matters Live and Local, sponsored by Badawi Law, and we're broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at WSF in Tampa. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, lots of decisions are made in Washington, and they depend on data, and the Trump administration has eliminated loads of evidence, details, and information on critical issues like household food access, climate change, healthcare, and more. And as even more massive sets of files are on the table for alterations, removals, and delays, the administration continues to fire people responsible for curating this data. WSF's Gabriella Paul has been researching what it means when so much government data is being scrapped. She joins us now. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're also joined by Beth Jarosa, Vice President of the Association of Public Data Users and Senior Fellow of the Massive Data Institute at Georgetown University. Beth, thank you as well.
Thank you for having me here.
And we want to hear from you too. Some of this data may feel a little bit abstract, but when you tie it to things like food security or climate change, that can have a real world impact. So if you have been impacted already by the loss or the removal or alteration of data, or you think that it might have some impact on your life, give us a call, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. All right, so Gabriella, what exactly is being removed? Especially, we've got to keep this in context, right? I mean, there's thousands and thousands of data sets that essentially have been untouched.
That's correct. You know, the vast majority of federal data is still intact, but we know there's at least a dozen federal data sets that have been either axed or altered, or some visibility aspect of it has been changed under the administration. That's in the last year, so about a dozen. That number's ticking up. But they're under several departments and agencies like the USDA and the EPA, and they're covering a range of issues, as you mentioned, from food security to health to agricultural labor, and the list goes on.
The government gives funding to many of the things we're talking about. It's food security, health, labor. So what does it mean that the data is being moved or shifted or altered in some way?
Precisely. A lot of these issues, as you can imagine, touch your life. So they touch government spending and government departments and programs that are meant to address social issues, like food security is a great example. And so in this reporting, as I talk to experts who tend to specialize or data scientists who specialize in a specific issue, they say it's really a loss of visibility on the issue, but also on the government spending to address that issue. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like throwing out the ruler, throwing out the measurement on how to benchmark and hold accountable, not just this administration, but future administrations as well, even past when these decisions are made.
Right. I think you referred to it, and some of your reporting is that the war on measurement, or that's how some people have referred to it.
Yep.
If I'm a Tampa Bay resident, I mean, why should I care about this?
Yeah, the $1 million question, right? It's not just about Excel sheets if you're not, a data scientist. This is, this data gets published and experts analyze it. They put out reports. That might not seem like it affects your life, but that is some of the ways that what government is doing becomes digestible to you. And if you know what's going on in government, that is a window, that's a door open to democratic participation. I talked with Elaine Waxman at the Urban Institute about this. She's a senior fellow and she really focuses on food security. Mm-hmm. And she put it this way. She says, in our modern world, like particularly, if you're not measuring something, it's easy to say it doesn't exist. Right. So data is
even
really,
if you are measuring stuff, it's easy for people to say no.
That's true. That is true. But it's another tool for journalists, for example, to have independently fact-checked objective data. It's a tool for you as someone who's in a democracy to be able to, put this measurement up against what an administration is saying and see, for yourself what impact it's having.
Now, if you have concerns about federal data being erased or altered, maybe you rely on federal data in some way, you can share those concerns, give us a call, ask a question, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org and reach out to us that way as well. Beth, Jaros, want to bring you into this conversation. You work with public data. So does this action harm Americans? And if so, how? I mean, just, back to that point that was being made earlier, it's only a handful of data sets out of thousands. So how does it impact Americans?
That's a really fantastic question. And I would say that it absolutely affects Americans. It affects Floridians. And yes, for now, it is just a handful of data sets, but we're seeing more and more data sets affected. And one of the examples, I want to dig a little more into food security and then maybe talk about climate. With the food security data, one of the things that we know is that the administration is making some fairly substantial changes to things like supplemental nutrition benefits. And at the same time that those changes are going into place, they have canceled the very thing that we would use to track whether or not people are able to afford groceries. So then what you're left with, it's sort of like if your doctor changes, you have high blood pressure, your doctor says, you know what, we're going to try a new medication for you, but we're not going to measure your blood pressure anymore. So then how do you know whether or not it worked? It's possible that these changes could have a positive effect. It's possible they'll have a negative effect, just like that blood pressure medication might help your blood pressure go down or might not. We won't know without checking. And one of the arguments that they used for terminating that particular food security survey is that it was redundant, saying, oh, well, we have lots of other data collections. But what we're finding is behind the scenes quietly, those questions have been removed from other surveys as well. So there's one big survey called in the current population survey asking about food security. We know for sure that one was terminated, but we're finding that they're just canceling data collection for food security kind of across the board.
Right. And
so
I think,
it's, go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of clarify, like it's not just a static set of data that's being removed or eliminated, it's the collection of data too, right? These are sort of dynamic groups of information or bundles of information that we're talking about here.
Correct. Yeah. These are, collected at least every year to like at that pulse check, that blood pressure check on how Americans are doing with, in this particular case, food security, but it's lots of other things. One of the other ones that's terminated that may really feel impactful to Floridians is FEMA had a tool that was a risk assessment tool for future climate change. And you can imagine things like sea level rise and future hurricane risk and flooding risk might really matter to people in Florida. I lived in Florida for years. It's something I cared about deeply. And that is another place where it was a tool that was available to the public. You could go and check the risk at your address, and that tool doesn't exist anymore either.
And Gabriella, I think you talked to a few folks in the climate change sphere about what they're seeing in terms of data kind of reduction or elimination. What do they say?
Yeah, I talked to Susan Glickman with the Clio Institute. It's a Miami-based climate action nonprofit. And, it wasn't particularly about that FEMA tool. But in addition to that, there's also been changes for American businesses reporting under what was called the Greenhouse Gas Reporting Program. Now, this is a proposed change to, change those requirements. We also know there's been some impacts to NOAA. That's NOAA. That's some satellite imaging for particularly used during hurricanes. So anyway, under that whole umbrella of a lot of changes impacting climate change tracking, Susan said, quote, "The Trump administration is hiding the facts and hoping that the issues will be ignored, out of sight, out of mind, but simply dismantling the data does not make the issues go away. We are just making uninformed decisions, making these challenges harder to address." And that was really echoed by all of the nonprofit leaders on multiple issues that I reported on.
Beth, in face of some of the federal data going away, the collection, the collation, how it's presented, what are folks like yourself doing, and the Association of Public Data Users? Is there some attempt to kind of stick your fingers in the dike, so to speak, and try and stop the loss of some of this information, or a backstop of some sort? Mixing up my metaphors there, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
It feels like we need all of those things. So yes, all of those metaphors are probably apt. I would say two ways of answering that question. One, there is no way that civil society, so volunteers or nonprofits or foundations or companies can step in and fill all of it. We don't have enough fingers to put in the proverbial dikes for the data that are being taken away. That said, a couple of pieces that are in place. There are private groups that are stepping in with some foundation funding, with some grant funding to try to recreate some of the tools that have been removed. There are some groups, you mentioned Urban Institute and Elaine Waxman, who are trying to find ways to measure food security while we have this gap in information. And that may be fielding surveys temporarily until we can get the federal government back in the role of doing that. But a big piece of it really is just getting the public involved. I've been working on data for 25 years. I've always cared, but it's the kind of thing where, just like when your electricity is working, when your air conditioning is working, you just don't notice it, and you don't notice it until it's gone. And now I think people are seeing that need to step in and voice their opinion and voice their concern. And part of what we're doing is actually training people, like, how do you know when this has been canceled? How do you push back and say, no, it's not okay to stop collecting data about climate. It's not okay to stop collecting data about health, about the drug abuse warning network, about whether or not there are more or fewer overdoses showing up in emergency rooms. It's not okay to stop collecting data about food security. There are steps people can take, whether it's reaching out to their congressperson or submitting comments to the federal government, that can help. So that's a big piece of the work that's going on now. Right.
In the last 20 seconds or so we have here, Gabriella, what are you watching for, and what are some of the local folks here doing to try and step up and, do what they can?
Yeah, I think echoing Beth there, a lot of the local nonprofits are trying to raise awareness first and foremost, but also supplement data in ways they can, and just ask Floridians to chime in and, speak up to protect their democratic participation that is on this bedrock of data.
These aren't just numbers. These are sort of tied to people and their lives as well. We've been speaking with WUSF's Gabriella Paul and Beth Jaros, Vice President of the Association of Public Data Users and Senior Fellow of the Massive Data Institute at Georgetown University. Thank you both so very much for your reporting and your insights.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Well, coming up next, a dip into some Florida history. We'll paddle down the Peace River and meet a good cemeterian who restores veterans' headstones. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
Listener support powers WUSF. Funding also comes from Tech House, celebrating 30 years as a strategic tech partner in the local community, helping small businesses navigate the terrain to stay secure and strong with AI, automation, and cloud security. More information is at tech-house.com. The 23rd annual Embracing Our Differences International Art Exhibition celebrates inclusion and kindness. It's free and runs through April 19th outdoors in Sarasota's Bayfront Park. Details are at embracingourdifferences.org.
Visitors are here, the roads are packed, and you're still holding on to a car you don't even drive. This winter, donate that car, truck, or boat to WUSF. You'll support local journalism, clear some space, and may get a tax deduction. Call 866-WUSF-CAR or visit WUSF.org.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Coming up in about 10 minutes, we'll have a conversation with the gubernatorial candidate Paul Renner. He's a Republican, former Speaker of the Florida House. And if you've got questions for Paul Renner, you can email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. And you can join the conversation in about 10 minutes. Well, now, let's take a dip into Florida history with help from reporters with the WUSF newsroom. If you've been to the Peace River, you probably know it's a great place to dig around for fossils. WUSF Steve Newborn kayaked down the Central Florida River, and he reports on how it's changed and yet still remains an ever-flowing slice of old Florida.
It's our second morning. We're about 15 miles south of Zolfo Springs, where we put in. About halfway to our destination, Arcadia.
5 of us paddled about 40 miles of the Peace just ahead of the first cold front of the year. It was 3 days and nights of quiet bliss, 1 dead boar, and a long window into Florida's past.
We've seen several kingfishers, great white egrets, and even a roseate spoonbill. The pinkish wings glistening in the sun is something to see.
The Peace winds 106 miles from the Green Swamp in Polk County to Charlotte Harbor on the Gulf. It was a doorway for conquistadors, the center of the state's phosphate industry, and now quenches the thirst of nearly 1 million people in 4 counties.
The miracle is that it still retains so much of its historic nature in so many places.
Cantor Brown Jr. is an historian who grew up in Fort Meade, just a few miles north of where we put in. He found the river of his youth so fascinating that he wrote a book, Florida's Peace River Frontier.
We have what passes for recorded history for 5,000 years. It just has historically been a semi-tropical paradise in its way.
The Industrial Revolution eventually came to this part of paradise in a big way. In the 1880s, pebbles of phosphate rock were discovered here. That set off a frenzy of mining because it's the key ingredient in the production of fertilizer. There are now 27 phosphate mines in Florida, covering nearly 500 million acres, and most of them are in this area known as Bone Valley. It's the nation's largest deposit of phosphate, and with it comes the dangers of mining.
The water here is just a beautiful caramel brown glowing in the sunlight. The color of this water wasn't always so clear. In 1971, a dike gave way at a holding pond for a phosphate mine way upstream and killed an estimated 1 million to 2 million fish. They said the color of the water was the color of chocolate milk.
Brown says the phosphate spills transformed the river.
The earliest pioneers all talked about the clear water, the springs that line the river up and down, the beautiful tropical birds that were everywhere, the fish that were so easily caught, and of course those phosphate spills pretty much did away with all that.
Phosphate was not the only thing early settlers found here. It's called Bone Valley because prehistoric fossils and huge fossilized shark teeth are found in the river.
We're down near Arcadia. We found a nice bend in the river with some sand, and my friend Noel Childress found half of a shark's tooth in 15 minutes digging in the sediment at our campground.
Brown told the story of a group of men who set out to explore the remote river back in 1860. They were scouting it in anticipation of it being developed, with the Army Corps of Engineers planning to dredge its sandy bottom into a navigable channel. But he said the river changed their minds, and that dredging didn't happen.
It transformed them. They went from talking about the technical possibilities of exploitation to just being awed by the beauty of it.
just as we were awed by the beauty of a river that has flowed through the pages of Florida history with its next chapter yet to be written. Steve Newborn, WUSF 89.7 News.
And you can see photos from Steve's paddling trip down the Peace River on WUSF.org. Well, next, WUSF's Daylina Miller introduces us to someone known as the Good Cemeterian for his work restoring veterans' headstones. Recently, Daylina visited Rose Hill Memorial Park in Tampa to learn more about headstone restoration. Here is the cemetery's general manager, Joseph Winters.
It's an honor to see such a caring group of people to come out and honor our veterans.
Winters introduces Andrew Lumish, a Land O'Lakes resident who has been restoring headstones for more than a decade. He's known as the Good Cemeterian. Today he's teaching folks the way the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs takes care of them. They received permission from living relatives to clean the headstones they're restoring. That's required by Florida law.
So when you go to a national cemetery and you'll see all of the headstones and they're all lined up perfectly and they're all in great condition, and that's because they maintain them the way you're going to learn to maintain them today.
While the group was there to focus on veterans, Lumish demonstrates proper restoration techniques and cleaning materials on the small upright headstone of 4-year-old Gerald Farmer, who died in 1947. He starts by scrubbing it with a wet Tampico brush made from natural plant fibers.
I'm going to get in here. I want to get it nice and wet. I don't care. I mean, you can even pour it on if you want. I do that too. Get in there, pour it on. You need more water, you just tell me, I'll get you water.
Then he sprays D2 biological solution directly on the stone. It's a specialty cleaner, and you have to order it online.
So it's safe for the grass, it's safe for the plants, it won't harm them. Again, 8-year study by the government to make sure that it was safe to use.
Lumish says you may be tempted to use bleach or a multi-purpose cleaner, but over time, the chemicals spread into the pores of marble, granite, and concrete and rot them from the inside. You let the D2 work its magic for a few minutes, and then go into it again with a brush and a towel to remove debris, tree sap, and anything else. Then one more spritz of the D2. After the demonstration, Lumish leads the group to an area where around 500 veterans are laid to rest. Linda Connor makes a beeline for a headstone that looks older and is in rougher shape than many of the others. She begins to scrub with a wet brush.
I see orange lichen. Ooh, yeah, it is kind of a mess.
She flew in from Boston, even though she's been cleaning and restoring headstones for 15 years as a member of the Association for Gravestone Studies. But she's a fan of Lumish's and follows him on Facebook, where he shares the history and stories of the people whose headstones he cleans. After a thorough brushing and some D2, the letters become more clear.
Looks like Isaac.
Across the cemetery, Connor's daughter Erin and Erin's boyfriend Sean Thompson work on their own headstones. Erin says she and her mother have been coming to cemeteries for years to look at and sometimes clean headstones. But today is Thompson's first time.
It was a beautiful day to be outside and kind of pay my respects.
He kneels down next to a flat grave marker with a small American flag planted in the dirt beside it. This is the final resting place of William L. Parker, a World War II veteran who died in 1956 at the age of 68.
I'm pretty satisfied with the results I see after I pour water on it. I know it's not as good as it'll become, but it still looks good after I rinse all this mud off of it.
Every time Lumish restores a headstone or teaches people like Thompson how to do it, he's also honoring a friend and employee who died by suicide.
I can't change the past, but in a way I get to talk about Chris. I get to honor Chris every time I honor another veteran, when I'm able to restore that monument and tell their story.
Lumish says the best part of teaching workshops is the ripple effect it has in the community. For every headstone he cleans and restores, he says, hundreds more are getting the same treatment because of the army of people he's taught and inspired to do the same. Daylina Miller, WUSF 89.7 News.
And you can see photos from Daylina and learn more about the Good Cemeterian at WUSF.org. Well, coming up next, what questions do you have for former Florida House Speaker, Republican Paul Renner? He's running for governor. You can call 813-755-6562 or email FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. Stay tuned. Florida Matters Live and Local continues in a moment.
On the next Fresh Air, the day poet Rachel Eliza Griffiths married her husband, Salman Rushdie, her longtime best friend died unexpectedly. 11 months later, Rushdie was stabbed multiple times while being interviewed on stage.
Great conversation on Fresh Air tonight at 7 on WUSF.
Funding for WUSF comes from listeners like you, and also Badawi Law, offering legal services in personal injury, immigration, and auto accidents, with offices in Tampa, Florida. Office information and practice details at badawilaw.com, or learn more on Instagram at Badawi Law.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. This November, Floridians will elect their 47th governor. Property taxes, public safety, healthcare, affordability, and other quality of life matters are top of mind for many of us who call this state home. That's why Florida Matters Live and Local is inviting candidates on the show to talk one-on-one about their plans for the future of Florida and allow you to directly participate in the conversation. So, what issues are important to you this election cycle? What solutions should candidates be bringing to the table? And what should they know about the people who they are running to represent? Call us, 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Well, here to join us today is Paul Renner. He's a Republican. He's the former Speaker, the 103rd Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives, and he's a candidate for governor. Mr. Renner, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
So, in a nutshell, why do you want to be governor?
Well, look, we've had a great run here in the free state of Florida, and as a key architect in that, I want to make sure we continue to build on our success going forward. And I don't think anyone on the Republican side of the aisle wants to go backwards. And again, looking at the wins we had when I was Speaker of the House, I'm the guy to carry on that legacy of Governor DeSantis.
Our listeners, as you probably know, Paul, are very interested in property taxes, and you have what you're calling the Renner rollback. It involves lowering property taxes to 2024 levels, and would also require local governments to have a two-thirds majority for any tax increases or additional taxes, and then a voter referendum for approval. How did you kind of come up with the calculus for that plan?
Well, in the two-thirds, we did the same thing to ourselves at the state level and said we have to have a two-thirds vote to increase any tax or fee or a new tax or fee. Local government should have the same restrictions, and I think the referendum idea is just to give the voters a final check so that if you have commissioners or city councilmen that want to raise taxes over and over again, the voters have a final say on whether they want to keep their own money in their own pocket based on the case that can be made by those elected officials. And if you make the case, you make the case. But on the rollback, this is the one thing that we can do that does not require us to go to the constitutional ballot. It was done 20 years ago. Very simple, can be done in a couple of days. It's not a big, beautiful bill, but it would allow us to move back millage essentially to whatever you paid in 2024 is what I propose, is what you'd pay today. So no tax increase in 2025, no tax increase in 2026 that we're just now experiencing with a new year, and gives everybody something material in the way of a tax break, which is still manageable for local government. Nobody can say that essential services won't be paid for and that type of thing, while we look at bigger, bolder reforms. The governor's talked about eliminating homestead property taxes. In my plan, we say, look, we'll take a look at that, and if that can be done, we'll offer it up to the voters if it doesn't happen in 2026. Or as a midpoint, let's at least look after seniors on fixed income and first-time home buyers, which are two groups that are really suffering with this run-up in property taxes, which is double the rate of incomes. And that's what people are struggling with, frankly, is everything is costing a lot more than their incomes can afford.
Okay, so you mentioned a few things there, but I wanted to drill down a little bit on the homestead tax. I mean, it would relieve a lot of people, put a lot of money in their pockets, unless they're in that first-time homebuyer class and they're still trying to get a foot on the property ladder. But what would you say to listeners who are wondering where funding for essential services like schools or public safety would come from? Because you are talking about taking a big chunk of that away from local governments, and people are worried about that.
Sure, and that's a legitimate concern. The governor said, I've said, with my plan, we're going to make sure that local governments certify public safety first. I think that's the core function of government, to keep our communities safe, before they go do some of the things that the Doge efforts and, all of us would agree are wasteful or not necessarily necessary for government to engage in. So there are two different conversations. The rollback, I would not replace it with anything. That just needs to adjust back the windfall the local governments have had back closer to where people's incomes can keep up with it. We start with that as the building block and hold those tax levels back at 24 levels, while we look at, is it a massively, significantly expanded homestead exemption, or can we go as far as the governor wants to go and eliminate all homestead property taxes? I would like to see that for people that have been here for some period of time. You've been here for 20 or 30 years. I see voters that talk to me all the time that are leaving the state because of those pressures as well as insurance costs.
Okay, but I'm not hearing, Paul, like a plan for how do you make up for that loss of income for local governments? I mean, and the Doge thing aside, like there are folks who say, well, look, we're worried about how schools are going to get funded, and aside from public safety, which I think people agree is important, what about roads? What about other essentials?
Yeah, and people have floated different ideas, whether that's an increased sales tax or something on the purchase of a home, like a tax, a one-time tax on the purchase of a home, or some infrastructure assessment that people would pay for.
Do you have a slate of ideas? Like, are some of those ideas that you would back at least?
No, I haven't laid those out, frankly, because that work is going to be done by this year's legislature. And sadly, I've called for this simple rollback that would give everybody relief right now and guarantee that. The legislature hasn't done it. They've got multiple proposals. They haven't come up with anything with the governor, and they need to get together very soon. We've been talking about it now for over a year. It's time for less talk, more action. That's what I'll do when I'm governor. And so if it fails in 2026, we'll, travel across the state and figure out what works for people, because it's got to get to 60% on the ballot. And if it's not something that's balanced, if it's not something that works for everybody, it won't pass. And so I don't know what that mix is going to look like or what the governor's going to propose for 2026. But I look forward to seeing what it is, hope to be able to support it. But it would have to be some mix of other revenues to make up for some of that. Now, I wouldn't replace all of it. I think this needs to be about tax relief, not full tax replacement. That, but I think if you're going to, depending on the community, and like in the city of Miami, I think it's like 7% of the overall is homestead. They could probably get rid of that with no problem and not replace any taxes. If it's someplace like Clay County, where all of their property taxes goes to local law enforcement, then you have an issue if you're getting rid of all homestead property taxes and you have to find some other mechanism to cover necessary government services. So that may look different in different communities, is my point.
We're speaking with candidate for Governor Paul Renner. If you'd like to join the conversation, maybe you've got a question for Paul, give us a call, 813-755-6562, or maybe you want to talk about the issues that are important to you, what you want to see a gubernatorial candidate address. You can also email FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. That's FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. Paul, you're a U.S. Navy veteran. Thank you for your service. What are some of the ways the state can better serve and support veterans? Actually, I maybe should back that up. Do you think the state is doing a good enough job of supporting veterans here in Florida?
Well, we can always do better. I think the state of Florida is very veteran friendly. There's a lot of benefits. There's even a booklet full of benefits that we accord to our veterans, as we should. But there's more to be done. There always is when it comes to mental health and suicide, homelessness, these types of things. When it comes to traumatic brain injury, when I was speaker, we funded a very exciting research at University of South Florida that will take 3, 4, 5 years to complete in hyperbaric oxygen treatment, where these guys that have received traumatic brain injury go in for these treatments, and over time we're hopeful that that will actually help heal the brain, where a lot of the other efforts for help in veterans have really just covered the symptoms. We don't want our veterans coming back and being on drugs the rest of their lives to deal with that traumatic brain injury that leads to depression, often leads to suicide, leads to social anxiety and going out and having a normal life when they get back from defending our freedoms abroad. This is very, very personal to me. I'm very passionate about it. We've got a Veterans Coalition that we are talking to, and those are some of the topics, as I said, homelessness, mental health, these types of things that we can hopefully get after for our veterans. Another component of that, though, is being veteran friendly when it comes to being moved into the state of Florida. One of the things I championed was occupational licensing reciprocity. So if your spouse, for example, has moved down with you, and let's say it's a he, and he's a barber in Virginia, he could get a license right away in Florida as long as his license is in good standing in Virginia. Yeah. This type of thing to just make life easier for veterans. We want them to come and retire here when they're done, because they really are hardwired for service. This is why I'm in public service as a fellow veteran, and we're going to take care of our veterans.
Yeah, a lot of veterans in Florida, to be sure. Got a call coming in from Daryl in Palm Harbor. Daryl, you're on the air. What would you like to ask Mr. Renner?
Mr. Renner, hi, how you doing today? My question is, why did our property tax go up so high anyway? That's a question that nobody seems to know. I do believe that you can link the 2017 cut that the federal government gave, and that's, if you look at it, that's when our property tax in Florida started going up. But my question to you is, have you pinpoint why our property tax went up so much? Everybody's talking about cutting it, but nobody is talking about why it went up.
Daryl, thanks so much for your question. Appreciate that. What about that, Paul?
Thanks, Daryl. I think the principal reason is property values have skyrocketed. And as you know, we have Save Our Homes for Homestead, which is 3% per year. But if you're on fixed income in a decade, that's a 30% increase that you probably haven't matched with your Social Security or your 401k. And then for non-homestead, it's even worse. It's a 10% cap. So if you're a renter or you're a small business, that's a 100% increase over a decade. And so it's really shot up as a result of increases in home values. That assessment then drives. And now that local governments can, and frankly, I believe should have, rolled back the millage to a reasonable amount so that people's incomes could keep up with the price of property taxes. This is the problem, whether it's property taxes, insurance, or groceries, is that people's incomes, this is a bipartisan statement, no matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, are not keeping up with your income. And so as a leader, we have to offer solutions to try to bring those prices down. I'll do that when it comes to property taxes, which I've described. I'll do it on insurance. I worked on that when I was speaker. I believe we can bring down those rates further, and we'll do those things where we can control. Now, I can't control grocery prices, but the first thing that needs to happen is Republicans and Democrats in Washington, D.C. need to stop overspending. The deficit spending, the exploding national debt is destroying the value of the dollar in your pocket, and it's irresponsible. It needs to stop. We have a balanced budget requirement here, and I will be a fiscal hawk, fiscal conservative when it comes to protecting your tax dollars in Tallahassee.
A couple of emails coming in. Please address the need for our senior population in need of legislation already proposed, passed for our vulnerable senior population. That's Terry. And then a question from Lauren asking, what does Mr. Renner mean by free Florida? Let's just get to the senior population. We're kind of short on time here, but what would you do for seniors? What's your plan to address their needs?
Well, I'm a former prosecutor, and I'll tell you one thing I'll get after. My dad's 84. He gets this stuff all the time, is all these scams that are saying, your Social Security is going to be cut off. Please put your information in now to continue your benefits. This type of thing absolutely enrages me as a former prosecutor and just as a citizen, someone with an elderly dad. And that's happening across the state of Florida. So we're going to protect our seniors from scams. We're going to make sure that we look after, and I was instrumental in bumping up reimbursement rates for our nursing homes. While we balanced our budget, we still had enough money left over to make sure we're paying medical staff an adequate sum. They do amazing work to take care of people in their final years that are suffering medically. And we're going to continue to do that to make sure we're taking care of people in our nursing homes in their most vulnerable moment in life.
And then the free state of Florida, I mean, that's something that obviously we've heard a lot from Governor DeSantis in the last kind of 30 seconds or so here. I mean, you're sort of basically picking up a slogan from the current governor. So are you doing something to make this your own? What do you think it is about that phrase that encapsulates what's happened in Florida, and how would you take it forward?
Well, there's a lot there to unpack in 30 seconds. But yeah, I was a key architect. I plan to continue down the path we're on. But I'll just offer you one thing. If you saw this video in Miami Beach of these officers coming to a poor woman who'd sent a harmless social media post criticizing the mayor, and they knocked on her door to challenge her and investigate her about it, That's not the America I fought for in the military. And I'm a strong believer in the First Amendment. I fought in the military in 2 wars so that you can have a disagreement with me on absolutely everything or anybody and shout it to the top of your lungs. That's your right as an American. I will protect that. So when it comes to the free state of Florida, it means we're not going to engage in a cancel culture from the right or the left. We're going to let people speak their mind. That's what America's all about. It makes us better. It's how we get to the truth and how we have robust debate, and I'll keep it that way here in Florida.
Former Speaker of the Florida House, Paul Renner, he's a candidate for governor. Thank you so much for taking some time to speak with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, a documentary about a pioneering elementary school teacher from Gainesville screens this week's 8th International Dunedin Film Festival. We speak with the director. That's coming up next when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
I'm Robin Young. We mark the end of President Trump's first year of his second term in office with a look at civility and how public discourse in America has become, well, coarse, insults, F-bombs, taunts.
You're a terrible person and a terrible reporter.
Next time, Here and Now.
Join us this afternoon from 1 to 3 on WUSF 89.7.
On the Bay Blend podcast, we highlight things to do in the Tampa Bay area you might not even know about, like when I went to Rustic Steel Academy to try my talents at welding.
Do you think I have a future as a welder if I wanted to change career paths?
I think I would not quit your day job yet.
Well, at least he was honest. On the Bay Blend podcast, we give you the news and some fun in your own community. That's the Bay Blend from WUSF, wherever you listen to your podcasts or online at WUSF.org.
The Ringling presents the Kavita Shaw Quintet, exploring her original compositions and arrangements of jazz standards and music from around the world. Performances will be at The Hat on January 23rd and 24th. Tickets at ringling.org.
Explore Tampa Bay the creative way. There's so many things to find in your own backyard. Visit artsaccessflorida.org/explore local.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. The 8th Annual Dunedin International Film Festival kicks off this week, and one of the featured films being screened this Thursday is the documentary Class of Her Own. It's about an elementary school teacher in Gainesville named Gloria Jean Merricks. In the early 2000s, she infused music and dance into the curriculum and in 180 days transformed a failing school into an A school. She made challenging math like geometry and fractions fun for her students. It's kind of catchy. So to talk more about the film is Boaz DeVere, the documentarian, a University of Florida alum. Go Gators. And he is also an associate professor of journalism at Penn State University. Boaz, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. Excited to be here.
So if you've heard of Ms. Merrick's teaching too, do you happen to be one of her students or an educator? You can weigh in on the conversation. Give us a call, 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Boaz, this documentary takes place in the early 2000s. FCAT, the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test, has changed the landscape of education of the state. And it felt like Gloria was taking a risk using pop music, other methods. Her students were mostly from poor households where parents couldn't help with homework. What does that say about her as a teacher?
It says that she cared. It says that she was able to change. She took a humongous risk. She risked really losing her career. She was told, listen, you gotta stick with the curriculum and you gotta stick with the pacing guide. And she said, but I've been doing that for 25 years. And what good has it done? She realized that their whole notion was wrong, that if these kids came from broken homes and high poverty kind of landscapes, that it was okay to just be happy if they passed. And when the school failed, she realized, no, I can't keep doing that. And so she raised her expectations of herself and of her students at the same time. And she said, no more. And she threw away the curriculum. She wrote her own curriculum. Why? She wanted to be accessible. She wanted to be relevant and encouraging and engaging to her students. And she they paid no attention to the pacing guides whatsoever and really took a chance. And the school even was not happy, not only the district, which was very unhappy with her, but even her own colleagues were saying, wait, we just failed the FCAT. Do you really need to be doing all of that? Do you really need to bring more heat onto the school? But she stuck to her guns. She brought in her principal to watch the kids learn at a whole new level. And the principal, God bless her, McNeely, she said, you know what? I'm going to join you in this rebellion.
So,
and it worked.
And it worked, as you say, or as we heard, it kind of was able to help turn the school around. I want to ask how you got involved, though, because this started as a project for you in 2008. It turned into a feature. It was completed in 2024, so that's quite a long time to be working on a movie, right? 16 years. What made the story so compelling you wanted to dig into it and kind of grow it for that 16-year process?
So sadly, I did not hear about Gloria until after she died in 2008. I was at the University of Florida. I was in the same town. And I'm ashamed to say, as a journalist, as a documentary filmmaker, that it took me that long to find out about the story. And then my initial approach was to really chronicle the school itself, because here was a school in a very low socioeconomic part of town that had become one of the best schools in Florida. It's extremely unusual nationally to see that. So I was fascinated. I was given unparalleled access to film the school for a year. And everyone thought, oh, we will do okay still, even though Gloria's gone. We'll do okay. We'll ace the FCAT. Maybe we'll drop to a B. But the school failed. And when the school failed, I realized I don't have a documentary here. What's the real story? You know, I can't make an audience sit through an inspirational story at the end of which the school fails, right? It's unfair to everyone involved.
So you kind of reframed it, and you went back and made the story about Gloria herself. And you were screening, I mean, I should say that the movie, A Class of Her Own, is screening at the Dunedin International Film Festival, but you were able to screen the movie in Gainesville with her relatives and former students. What was that experience like?
It was an honor for me, something I'll remember for the rest of my life. It really made me feel like I did the right thing and did it the right way, you know, which you don't know until you show it to the right people. And everyone felt that it portrayed Gloria in a very accurate way, despite the fact that I never had the opportunity to film her. I had to piece together a portrait of her through the recollections and descriptions of other people. And people told me it felt like she was here, like she came alive. Here she was. We could touch her. We can talk to her again. And that really, even now, gives me goosebumps to think about that, you know, I was able to do that through the great generosity of the community, the family, the colleagues, the former students, all these people who stepped up and really kind of shared with me not just what she was like, but what it was like for them to go along for this transformation. It was a community-wide transformation, and to be able to capture it is something that I'll always cherish for the rest of my life.
I mean, 2008 isn't really that long ago, but it's kind of before the era when absolutely everybody had phones and they were filming everything constantly, it feels like. So it must have been a bit of a challenge to find the footage you needed, I imagine. Like, were you able to use a lot of archival stuff?
I was lucky because Gloria was a master teacher and one of the most innovative teachers really in American history. I mean, we're talking about someone extraordinary who will become part of history, I believe, whose story will be told down the line. Because of that, scholars, including graduate students, professors, researchers, studied her. And some of them, on occasion, filmed what she was doing in the classroom, and a couple even sat down and asked her questions. Mostly technical, pedagogical kind of questions, but nonetheless, they were generous enough to share that footage with me. And so I was able to bring some of that rawness. Here it is. Here's what it actually looked like in real time into the documentary. And really, I don't think I have a good documentary without that.
Yeah.
So thank God they did it, and thankfully that they shared it with me.
We're speaking with documentarian Boaz de Veer about his film Class of Her Own. It's screening Thursday at the Dunedin International Film Festival. If you've seen the movie, or maybe you know about teacher Gloria Jean Merrick's, you can join the conversation by calling 813-755-6562 or emailing FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Boaz, this is the 8th year of the Dunedin International Film Festival. You're going to be here for the screening of your film. What is the importance, or I guess the magic, of local film festivals like this?
Well, I make documentaries because I want to stimulate discussions. I don't necessarily set out to change anybody's mind or convince anybody of anything, but I want them to talk about the issues that are brought up in the documentary. And there are several that are extremely relevant and timely. And I'd love for people to take that away and figure it out for themselves. And we are seeing right now on the national landscape and even locally, really, in many places, very little serious discussion about our educational system, which is, let's step back and think about it. It is failing our students. We are teaching K-12 students the same way we taught them 100, 150 years ago. The teachers, and God bless them, they mean very well, and they're great people. But they stand in front of the classroom and they lecture at the students who are tuning this out. Now, think about this. Why would something that might have made sense, I'm not sure it did back then, but let's say it did 100 years ago, 150 years, or even in my days of growing up in the 80s, why would that still be relevant to use today? We need to innovate the way we teach. We need to change the way we teach completely in an era of not just, by the way, cell phones and social media, but AI. And what's next? AGI, when AI is smarter than us? We can't keep teaching kids the same way. And Gloria shows us a path forward. She shows us how we can customize the learning for the students. So it's no longer cookie cutter. It's much more involved on their level. They're active participants in their own education. And we have to adopt that vision or we will be in trouble as a society.
We've got a call coming in. Lily is calling. I believe this is our former intern, actually, Lily Belcher. Lily, you're on the air. Go for it.
Hi there. I wanted to know what the reaction was of her family and friends getting to see you bring her story back to life.
Thanks for that call. What about that?
They were singing along, they were dancing, they were crying, they were laughing, they were hugging, they were kissing. They brought me into the fold. They gave me hugs, so I was very lucky. And they really treasured this opportunity to be with Gloria again. She was such a magnetic personality that even to be in her presence was impactful for folks. And so to be with her again and for all of us to be together with her again was a special moment, and I was thrilled to be part of it. I also have built a kind of relationship with them over the years, so open that they would tell me if there was any sort of an issue or if I missed something or told something not in the most accurate way. And I'm a stickler, being a journalist, for getting it exactly right. But they said that somehow, luckily, this time we nailed it. There she is. We got it right.
It's probably a luxury, though. I mean, you don't always get 16 years to make a movie, right? So having that time to develop and foster those relationships with the people that you're telling the story about is quite unique.
It is. I'll tell you what the journey was like. In 2009, I realized I don't have a film. I have to start from scratch and focus on Gloria, which was a blessing in disguise from a filmmaking point of view. Then I spent a few years doing that. I interviewed about 50 people, again, former students, family members, scholars, colleagues, you name it, all over. And then I put the film together, which was then a half-hour film called Discovering Gloria, which I meant as a pedagogical film for educators. Mm-hmm. And I screened it around the state in conjunction with school districts. And everywhere I went, where it was always sold out and tons of people came, I kept hearing, no, this belongs to a big audience. It's not just for educators. So for a while, I was using Discovering Gloria in academic settings. And then one day, a few years later, it hit me, you know what? I really do need to make a feature film for everybody, and that's a class of our own. That's when that came about, and I finished that in 23, but then it took a few more months to be released, and then it was out on all major platforms, including right now for free on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, etc. And it's screened in more than 20 film festivals around the world, including Finland and Canada and Russia, so it travels better than I ever expected.
And you'll be able to see it at the 8th Annual Dunedin International Film Festival on Thursday. And as Boaz mentioned, streaming on platforms like Tubi and Apple TV. Boaz, thank you so much for your insights and talking about your film. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, next time on Florida Matters Live and Local, who speaks for the trees at New College? We'll take a closer look at development plans at New College. Tune in Wednesday at noon. That's our show for today. Florida Matters executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producers are Amelie Horace and Quincy Walters. Our engineers are Jackson Harp and Gio Garvin, and Jackson composed the theme music. Chandler Bolcom handled the video today. You can subscribe to Florida Matters wherever you get your podcasts and watch on WSF's YouTube channel. I'm Matthew Petty. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll see you at noon tomorrow.